Hello, this is PR 101, Essentials for the Public Eye. So it's the broadest possible PR talk you can imagine, and we'll see what we can do with that. I'm supposed to remind you before I start talking to not take calls during the talk and to fill out the eval form and be kind. A little bit about me. My name is Sibel Sunar. I'm the founder and the principal of 47 Communications. We're a full-service PR firm. As a matter of fact, we're the PR firm for the Game Developers Conference. And I've been doing GDC's PR for nearly 15 years, and this is the first time I'm speaking, so this is a big accomplishment. We work with lots of different kinds of companies. We work in technology, digital lifestyle, and video games, all types of companies that touch video games. That's what we're most famous for, actually. And just, to give you a sense of breadth, we work with really large companies like Electronic Arts, Warner Brothers, Google. We work with sort of new establishment type of companies. We've worked with Supercell, Machine Zone, Riot, these kinds of companies. But we've also worked with up-and-coming mobile companies and indies. We've done Kickstarter programs. We work with technology companies like Havoc and Epic, and on the mobile analytics and marketing side, Upsite. I won't go on and on naming clients. It might seem like a little bit of a plug, contextually relevant, though, which is part of what we're going to talk about. But in any case, it gives you a sense of the type of breadth that we are able to address. So hopefully I'll be able to touch on a little bit of breadth. So how did I get here? It's a little bit strange, actually, that I'm speaking as a PR practitioner because I, was originally my background was an artist and a media studier more so than a practitioner, and I sort of looked at it from more the artistic, academic, and intellectual side. I was very interested, but my attitude toward the practice itself was a little bit, I'm not going to read the title of the French book, by Jacques Seguela from the 1979, but it translates to, "Don't tell my mother I work in advertising. She thinks I play piano in a brothel." And so that was my general attitude toward message makers, but I eventually made peace with it. It's even started my own firm, and I actually am very proud of the fact that we help build fulfilling careers, tell interesting stories, solve problems creatively, and so on. So I'm a happy PR person now, but it took a while to get here. Before I go on, who are you guys? Do we have, raise your hand if you work in mobile. Indie games. Core games. One guy. Are you on the business side, marketing side? Any community managers? Couple. Okay, so we have kind of a broad group here, so I'll try to make it as relatable as possible. First, we'll start with defining what we mean by public relations for the purpose of this talk. We mean communicating publicly, of course, through a couple of different means. Indirectly, through press outlets, which is what most commonly people think of, and then also social media, forums, direct communications. What we're not going to talk about is, paid advertising, YouTube contracts, those kinds of things. We're going to talk about direct relationships, and we're going to talk about earned media in the broadest possible strokes. So, and we're also going to talk a little bit about proactive media and PR versus reactive media and PR, and then we're going to kind of talk about best practices across all of those things. Just a quick note about the kind of world we live in right now, which is the internet and the general media landscape's impermanence and permanence. You may put up a piece of news out there or say something, and you can blink and you can miss it. By the same token, it goes on your permanent record. So it's really scary if you take a misstep. But if you're trying to get something across and trying to get visibility, you have to repeat yourself over and over again, and not necessarily the same piece of content, but the same message and the same sort of general visibility and the awareness. It takes hammering and hammering until it gets into the public consciousness. So we're dealing with a little bit of a dichotomy, and that can make it difficult for people to know where the balance is. But before we talk about the specifics of going out there and talking and responding, the first step is to take a step back, really, and get ready. So it's really important to spend some time thinking about your story. Do you know what your story is? In some cases, you might be talking about a company, an individual, an opinion, usually a game in this context. Do you know what your differentiators are? Are you able to talk about it in a really crisp and memorable way? Does it sound like you, or does it sound like, the marketing machine is talking? These things are really important to identify, and this is a good place to start thinking about if you need help. And that help doesn't necessarily have to mean an agency. It could just mean hiring someone internally or having a conversation among the executives or whatever. But it does mean that you should take a step back and huddle and figure out what your message is and what it sounds like, so that you have it at the ready and you can be pithy and quick and convincing and consistent. And the second thing is you want to be mindful. And what this means is that you kind of want to set filters that are always going to serve you, no matter whether you're being proactive, reactive, speaking directly with the public in one form or another, or through the conduit of media. And so these filters could be, setting your goals. Why do you want to be doing PR? Do you know why you want to be doing PR? Is it just sort of promiscuous wanting visibility, or is there a particular reason why you're seeking this awareness? What is the context, whether that's the landscape of the sector or what milestone your company's at, what kind of tone there is out there in terms of what dialogue you're participating in, if there's a larger industry discussion. It can be authenticity. What does it mean for your company to sound and be authentic? This is really important, in particular with social media now, but also I would argue with media relations. And so what does authenticity mean for you? How do you make people feel like they have access to your company, your product, in a relatable way? What is the personality of the company? What should you sound like? Are you friendly? Are you a voice of authority? There's a million different ways that you might want to set that filter, but and also you probably want at some point to address what are sort of the legal ramifications of what you might do. Most people don't think about the legal side very often because, usually when you're doing game PR, you're mostly just trying to get assets out there or launch your game or whatever. But, there can be legal concerns, and understanding those parameters as a marketer or a PR person or a community person or a customer service person is super important. The key to setting these filters is that you want to be able to develop your gut sense at the end of the day. You don't want this massive process every time you have an opportunity or an instinct, but you want to be able to, be fresh and present and, optimal every time you interact with the public. And the notion is that the more you train your mind to put all these opportunities through these filters, the better you'll be at being able to either respond or proactively speak. So a few things about proactivity. There are a bunch of different scenarios that could be right for you why you might want to be proactive. And you'll want to sit down and figure that out. If you're at a certain point in the marketing campaign, you're trying to get pre-launch awareness because you have a AAA game and you want pre-orders, this could be a reason why you're seeking proactive PR. You might be looking for customer acquisition at a launch. You might be recruiting for your company. You might want your opinion out there because you want to be established as a thought leader. You might be looking to strengthen a brand or the valuation of your company. You might be trying to be a good partner to a developer you're working with if you're on the publisher side. There's myriad reasons why you might want to have proactive press. And there's multiple ways to do this through the conduit of media and then also directly. So starting with media, I think the key is to figure out how to balance, between your needs of awareness building and media realities. So, there's one theory that there's an infinite number of people who could potentially play your game. We talked about you blink and you miss something on the internet, so you want to be repetitive. You want to maybe potentially start early and speak frequently and build a grassroots campaign. And that's typically been known as a good thing to do for games, especially for indies, but the landscape is changing a little bit, and this isn't always possible, and there are some cases where you might not even want that. You might have a particular kind of game where pre-awareness actually is a loss, where you don't want necessarily to have a lot of chatter about your game before you can kind of convert people into playing, for example, especially with casual mobile games, let's say. But, more importantly, the media landscape also is important to understand. And so if you're going to engage in a media campaign, you need to understand that there are finite press opportunities. And there's part of the reason for this is because there's X number of press out there. And so many pages, and I don't mean, print pages, obviously, that's, almost gone completely. But just space-wise, there are finite opportunities. And that also means that there's potential fatigue in a topic. They can't cover the same thing over and over again. They may feel that they've exhausted it after a while. And despite what many people want to see, press are human beings, and they have their own preferences, and they are, they want to cover what they want to cover. Sometimes they cover things that they want to be critical of. Sometimes that they love. But they do have preferences, and they're not obligated to cover every single thing we ask them to. Something can be interesting, but not worth running. It could be because something is marginally interesting, or it's just a sliver and not a full story, or it's a sub-bullet on a bigger story. You can get the press interested, but still not get a story, and you have to not get bent out of shape because it's still worth talking with them. You have to recognize that incremental changes are not often that interesting. When you're working on a game and you're so close to the material, every little jump may seem significant to you and the company around you, or maybe to the lead designer or the animator that you're dealing with who's telling you this is a big leap and a big deal, but that might not be perceptible by the press, and it might not be obvious to their readers, and they're a decent filter for their readers, because even if they love your game, they have obligations to balance out what kind of coverage they give. And sometimes, especially for indies, they acknowledge that it's unfair that they're able to only give this much attention to your game where they cover, tons and tons of what seems like incremental change on big AAA games, for example. But there's an audience for that, and they need to serve their audience. And so at the end of the day, they have to pay the bills too, and it's a two-way street. It's a business for both involved. And this has nothing to do with, being mean or integrity or anything like that. This is just the fact of media life. So this doesn't mean, obviously, that you can't get any press. It just means that if you understand the landscape, you can be much more thoughtful and think about how you bring value to a journalist when you approach them. So really getting press is about thinking about what people care about. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Obviously, a lot of companies already understand that they need to build interesting assets, offer timely news, things that have a sense of urgency, sometimes contrived or real. Joining a broader discussion about the industry landscape, which can have its pitfalls, which we'll get to in a second, but that can be a valuable way to participate. These are all good things to do. And, I would argue that you want to keep in touch with the media even when they're not necessarily covering you, and though they can't produce an article every time you talk to them, because you can become a valuable source. They'll have a decent context for where you're coming from. But the key is figure out your own voice, and learn some best practices, but don't follow a template, rinse, repeat. You want to make sure that you have your own custom program. So what else can you do besides media? I think everybody already knows that there's these venues, but does everybody think of them as, sort of an integrated PR program? You can blog. This is a good place where you can build your own audience, have a place where you can say exactly what you want to say, build a body of work that you can point people to. Obviously there are social channels that you've got to remember the old McLuhan saying of the medium is the message, which means essentially that the delivery method is part of what your content is. So be thoughtful about what you put on which social channel and how you engage with people. Showing is better than telling a lot of the times, and if you're able to, streaming, Twitch, these are really good things in the absence of being able to go through a journalist conduit. If the timing's right, let people play your game. Engaging directly with the community, if you can, whether it's at bigger events or in your office or whatever, is also great, because even if people are half interested, once you convert them by giving them early access, they become your biggest evangelists. We've seen this time and again. So letting people in, not just press, but your community in, is really, really important. So this is all good and fine, proactive stuff. What about reactive? We like to talk about reactive PR being an active stance as well. And why would you be doing reactive PR? It seems like most people are interested in seeking visibility, but there are actually lots of reasons why you might be doing reactive PR, so to speak. You might be deliberately staying quiet because you're resetting the company, or you're preparing for a big milestone, or because you have a strategy that's speaking fewer, bigger, better milestones. You might not be working on something that would benefit from too much early hype that could work against you. So you might be deliberately staying quiet, and then we'll have to deal with reactive inquiries. Another reason you might be engaging in reactive PR is if you're being approached for commentary, if there's a bigger outside topic or there's news that might involve you. There could be community or customer inquiries coming to you directly where you need to respond. And then, of course, the least favorite of everybody's, which is crisis communications. And crisis communications is... it might sound cliche, but preparedness is really the key. And in 2014, things move super, super fast. So we're not going to do we don't have enough time to do a whole lecture on crisis communications. But I would say that, really working on those goals, filters, tone, the stuff that we talked about in the beginning, and then being ready to act quickly, decisively, is going to be really important. Obviously, you want to be able to take a breath, because you won't be able to apply the filters otherwise. And it's better that you lose 2 seconds than make a mistake. But we just no longer have the time to, think for days and days before we respond to something. So some of the tough stuff that the advisory board folks wanted me to mention, put a little bit because we've had an interesting media environment lately. I'm not going to talk about Gamergate, by the way, but we can all acknowledge that it's been getting a lot of media attention and been on people's minds, and people have been participating either individually or as companies or whatever. So some of the stuff that the advisory board wanted to hear about was how to, to get some tips around how to deal with, the tough stuff, really. So proactive PR is hard. We complained a minute about how hard it is to get press. And getting attention can be hard, but the sort of elegant management of reactive PR can be harder. And so there's lots of different ways that you can get hit with that. And we talked about crisis communications a minute ago, but it doesn't always have to come to crisis. Like, it's not always like there's a giant recall going on or, huge scandal or whatever. There's, sometimes just a daily onslaught of tough things to deal with. And those things can be critique of your work, and you've been working so hard, and, the media are coming in giving you bad reviews, or it could be just tweets that are mean, or it could be trolls on the net being hateful and attacking you for seemingly no good reason. It could be that you need to engage players directly because there's customer service issues. It could be that the internet tone didn't translate because sometimes words come across dry or condescending or whatever because you haven't thought it through, and then you have to neutralize some damage that you've done yourself. It could be again, like controversy unrelated to you and how you participate in it, and how do you develop a stance for that. And then there could be the legal and approval related concerns that we sort of touched on earlier. So there's lots and lots of different ways that you might be exposed to tough reactive PR, and not all of it is through the media. In fact, a lot of it is through social, community, forums, customer service, and even talking to each other at live events, because all of that really falls under communicating to the public. Just to spend a second on participating in a larger topic. I think whenever we see a hot button topic that we have an emotional response to, it's our instinct is to jump in and tweet something out, or post something on Facebook or whatever. But it's really important, because of this permanent record that is the internet, that we check to see if we fully see the full picture, before we jump in, so that we can first of all figure out whether we see the full picture that we can even offer a point of view on. But then is it, can we put it in the proper context to communicate it? So I don't know if you guys remember the Joe Paterno firing. No Penn State sports fans here, but there was a huge scandal a couple of years ago where the coach of a football team got fired for essentially covering up child abuse, sex abuse issues. And Ashton Kutcher tweeted to his 28 million followers that he was upset about this because he was a fan, and he basically hadn't looked into the whole affair and was just upset that one of his favorite coaches was fired. Tweeted that out, huge backlash, as you can imagine, and he spent many, many following days apologizing and going through, damage control. And so that was a perfect case of, blind man and the elephant. He only saw one corner of it, didn't pay attention, and didn't realize that he commanded, an audience the size of half of France. So that was tough. So it's important to see, and that happens over and over again. I mean, obviously I picked a long ago and remote to us topic, but there are closer to home examples of that. And in the same Ashton Kutcher example, he then, as part of his apology, decided to turn over his social media management to his social media agency, which he had co-founded. And then he got hit even harder because they said, well, the only reason we follow Ashton is because he's authentically Ashton and he's talking to us. And so this is BS. Now it's going to be this corporate filter, and we're not going to get to hear what he says. And so he couldn't win for losing for a minute, but he's Kutcher, so he survived fine. But, the point is, authenticity is the other thing you need to think about. So you can't just be so scared that you dilute completely what you're putting out there. And so the important thing there is to really look at all of your relationships, whether they're direct or indirect, and make sure that they're authentic. And if you're using conduits like an agency, or there's someone manning social media in your company or whatever, that they become connected to the matter, closely, and they can be credible sources. And it's important to have a conversation about the difference between earnest or boundaryless or naive, because authenticity does not necessarily mean knowing no boundaries or filters. Another thing that matters is, timing is everything, as they say. I love this picture. It's not really related to PR at all, but this guy got arrested while getting a haircut, and it's just like Google image search is so awesome. But so timing matters, obviously, in proactive PR timing. Like if you're planning to announce something, you probably want to be aware of global events. Are there conferences going on? Is it earnings season? Is your competitor launching? What time of day is it? There's certain times of the week that's better to get retweets. Did you know that Wednesdays and Thursdays are better and afternoons are better than morning? There's all kinds of these kinds of timing issues to pay attention to. Also synchronizing your sort of news and classic PR activities with social so that you get an integrated echo effect and it's not just disparate bits of information. Timing matters in that regard, but also response timing matters, kind of like we were talking about earlier. When you're responding to something tough or someone grousing online or something that's bad vibes on Twitter, you want to be able to respond swiftly so you can neutralize so it doesn't spread. You need to be able to go through your filter check and, like we said again, breathe for a second, but make sure you respond quickly. And then, of course, you have to perform with grace under pressure. And there's, a couple of different things that may require grace under pressure. With customer relations, which could be very much community management, it doesn't necessarily mean the customer service line 1-800. It could be in forums or Reddit. It could be, in all these different channels where you're interacting directly with your public. You have to acknowledge the issue.
Sorry, we're at time.
Okay.
But I want to remind you that we do have a wrap-up room right
I
now.
Literally have 2 minutes. Okay, great. Thanks. So what you want to do is acknowledge the issue, help, don't hype or fuel. Having a venting forum could be really helpful so that you can coordinate the voice there and you can identify negativity quickly. And then people talk a lot about reputation management right now, and a lot of that has to do with social media and having to sort of fix what you have been saying. So if you need to do that, if you've taken a misstep, say you're sorry and mean it. Set the record straight, be honest and honorable, and take criticism well. This doesn't mean you're going to be spineless. It means that you just need to be able to confront an issue and deal with it head on and kindly. Finally, just a couple of notes on legalese. Sometimes people wonder what they could get in trouble for. And so these are just quick tips and that I'll leave you with. So, if you're wondering what an endorsement is following someone on Twitter an endorsement? No, not really. It's a gray area, but it's visible. Is sharing someone's content an endorsement? Still gray area, but unless you add context around it, it could be misconstrued. Commenting, if you don't want comments back and if you don't want that kind of attention, don't comment on something. If you're running contests or sharing pictures or videos from an event, if you're worried about it, make sure you've got a release to be able to share individuals' pictures, because that's a kind of a sensitive area. If you have a gut sense that says you need to clear something with your company, do so. And separate your personal business opinion, but know that it's all visible. So sometimes people will put disclaimers to protect their company, but you still need to make sure it's all visible. The cameras and the social medias are always on. If you remember, the CEO of Centerplate recently had to resign for videos catching him kicking a dog, so he was off duty then, but that didn't do him any good. Anyway, good luck and thank you out there.